No fuzzy, out-of-focus greenery just beyond. No fake wood paneling. No impressive array of diplomas or important books on a mahogany shelf placed just so behind the sitter. Just a neutral background, usually cloth, against which the subject comes immediately into focus. We are not distracted by the background. We are arrested by the subject. We see them because he sees them. And in that moment, Andrew Kilgore presses the button which closes the shutter and clicks into existence a moment in time where we too feel that we have a lens to the soul. Andrew Kilgore was born early in the winter of 1940 in Charlottesville, Virginia. About the time he was 6 years old, he and his family moved from the graceful and genteel birthplace of presidents to the bustling City of Light, Aurora, Illinois, just outside Chicago. Though quite different from one another in terms of tempo and pace, these two cities shared key similarities. Each enjoyed a national reputation for beauty of architecture and infrastructure, and they were also predominantly white, upper-middle-class communities. In 1956, his family moved again, this time to El Paso, Texas. For the 16-year-old Andrew Kilgore, this was more than just a family move to a new house in a new state. It was the beginning of a new awareness of diversity and multiculturalism. Though military expansion and the discovery of oil in the El Paso area had engendered rapid economic expansion, the proliferation of most post-war jobs were in low-wage industries. As a result, local middle-class white Americans rapidly left the region in search of communities offering more job and income potential. To balance these losses of her local labor force, El Paso in 1956 was still actively involved in FDR's Braquero program, which not only allowed but encouraged Mexican laborers to migrate and balance the losses of the native white population. The community was radically and richly different than anything young Kilgore had experienced in the white, upper-middle-class worlds of his early childhood. This was more than a move. This was a landmark in the evolution of his activist heart and artist's eye. As a young man, Kilgore felt a strong connection to the ministry and service. Intending to ultimately become a Presbyterian minister, he received his undergraduate degree in philosophy in 1963 and then moved to New York, attending Union Theological Seminary in Manhattan.
When I was 14, I felt a call to go into the ministry, and I functioned out of that sense of call for several years in the most direct way by studying philosophy and going to seminary and all that sort of thing. But my minister gave me this book when I was about 18, and it had an incredible effect on me and still has an effect on me today. Yielding to these persuasions, gladly committing ourselves in body and soul utterly and completely to the light within, is the beginning of true life. It is a dynamic center, a creative life that presses to birth within us. It is a light within which illumines the face of God and casts new shadows and new glories upon the face of men. That's been like at the heart of me since I was 18.
Despite the fact that he wouldn't buy his first camera for 6 years, it was here in New York where he would meet and work with two extraordinary mentors who would shape his gift for truly seeing others by first teaching him how to clearly see himself. While at Union in New York City, he studied under the legendary Robert Seaver. Not long after Kilgore was selected by Seaver as an actor for one of the highly prestigious seminary productions, directed by Seaver himself, he was soon studying with one of the most influential teachers in American acting history, the world-famous Stella Adler.
She taught me a lot about being attentive, about being totally aware as you're working with someone. She was a great acting teacher.
Seaver and Adler both taught Kilgore to put himself in the place of the character, to approach a character without judgment by putting oneself 100% in the other person's shoes. The 23-year-old Andrew Kilgore would learn these lessons well and apply them to more than just the stage. He would do that through the lens of his camera, with astonishing, moving, and transfixing results. Following the call of "Make love, not war," in 1966, he joined the Peace Corps and served for 2 years in India. While on holiday in Hong Kong, he purchased his first camera, and in 1969 began working with severely disabled children for the Texas State Commission for the Blind.
So I took my camera out to the institution where I worked with institutionalized children and shot a bunch of images of those kids with this 35mm camera, and then developed a film. And the first time I made a print of one of those images, as that print came up in the developer solution, I got that, that chill down my spine, that recognition that I had found my natural home. That at the age of 28, I'd finally found what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
It was here that he first began his passion for focusing, literally and figuratively, on those whom are so often ignored and either accidentally or deliberately overlooked. And the seeds of his later lifetime commitment to advocacy photography were planted.
I took the photographs to a friend who owned a little bookstore where he sold kind of new age and mystical kinds of books. And I showed him the pictures, and I gave him the envelope with the pictures in it, and he walked over across a kind of large room, and I didn't want to intrude on his experience, so I kind of stayed back. And I watched him pull the photographs out and put them on top of the envelope and stare at the one on top for a long time. And then, without looking at any of the other ones, he took the whole stack of photographs and put them back in the envelope and turned back towards me with the envelope. And I was thinking at that moment, oh, that's disappointing. He didn't want to look at the rest of them. But as he walked towards me, I saw that he had 2 tears running down his cheeks. And that was the first time that I saw my photographic work produce that kind of emotional response in another person.
The age of Aquarius opened up the eyes of America's youth to new ways of experiencing, and Andrew Kilgore was no exception.
It was a great time, and I think we wanted to change the world. We wanted to stop the violence. We wanted to everyone to have what they needed to be happy. We wanted to teach people to live a simpler life closer to the earth. And in some ways we failed miserably, and in some ways I think we succeeded incredibly.
more and more, what people responded to in my work were pictures of people. And I realized that that was what really moved me as well. So I wanted to do portrait photography, but I wanted to do it in a way which at that time was not popular. As a matter of fact, it was hardly even there. A archival black and white, a kind of documentary style portraiture was very uncommon. Everything was the same formatted kind of commercial approach to photographing people. So I needed to kind of teach my prospective clientele the value of this particular kind of photography. So I invented a project and called it the Fayetteville Townfolk Portfolio Project. And the idea was just to do a kind of general demographic study of this small middle America university town, all the different kinds of people who lived here. And I worked on it for 3 years, I guess, and got some support along the way, just sold pictures to people, managed to get attention for doing that. And then I found out about the Arkansas Endowment for the Humanities and applied to them for a grant to finish that project and produce a touring exhibit of those photographs, which then toured all over the state, and including Little Rock.
When I first came here, in fact, it was my first year here, Andrew was involved in the Fayetteville portfolio. And it struck me right away, before I knew him, it struck me right away as what a wonderful thing to do. What a wonderful thing I would love to have as an historian 50 or 100 years from now, to be able to look back at this time and see not only how people dressed, but to connect with those folks so long ago, and to get a sense of what it was like to live in this town during those times.
I've got to tell you, there is a photograph he took of my mother and me, and it was taken 34 years ago. And I remember right now how I felt when the shutter clicked on that one photograph. There were many photographs that afternoon. My mother was traveling cross-country, had just a few days. Andrew was filming the Fayetteville Townfolk portfolio. My mother and I went in there. Now, we had not been close. We could not remember being close as a mother and daughter. So why we wanted our photographs taken, I don't know, but we did. We showed up that afternoon, hot afternoon. And Andrew began clicking our picture. He took dozens of pictures, and he finally said, "Can't you two get any closer?" Because we weren't touching, you know. "Can't you two get any closer?" Well, I remember touching, she was here, touching, and that was it. And he kept taking pictures. And he finally said he said, let me help you, let me help you. So he had me lean so that our heads were literally touching. And in that moment, the only way I could tolerate that moment was to focus intently on Andrew's own eyes. I leaned into him with such trust. What he did with that, all the photos were taken. He said, "This is the one." He said, "Forget the others. This is the one." And I looked at that one, and I saw something that was true, that I had never seen for myself. I saw a connection with my mother, and I felt it. And she and I both began to live into the relationship that he captured, that we had never known. And I cherish my mother, and I will lean into her any day of the week. But that was a healing moment, but it took my trust in Andrew, not as a deep and dear friend, he really wasn't, but his empathy was so powerful that I anchored in his gaze. I allowed myself to be fixed in his gaze, and he captured something that I hadn't yet seen, that I had never known. He showed me. And we have become the two women in that photograph.
It includes a photograph of my wife and her mother that I still cannot look at without my throat catching. That photograph was taken, incidentally, within a few months of my meeting her. So I look at that photograph and remember Suzanne when I met her. So I'm hopelessly biased.
That was a big turning point because the touring of that exhibit around the state gave me a statewide kind of recognition. And people really liked the work. So that kind of propelled me onto the next chapter, which involved moving my family to Little Rock so that I would be close to funding sources and could develop a series of photographic projects that would explore different populations of people. All the projects that I've ever done, we would choose a particular demographic, but then within that demographic, we would try to include as many different kinds of people as possible. Working out of Little Rock, I photographed all over the state. So I go to little towns and, state hospitals and daycare centers and just any place where I could find people to photograph. And again, the product was a touring exhibit, and that exhibit toured all over the country. I think it went to 37 different states and 16 or 17 different state capitol buildings, because the advocacy organizations that I partnered with, on the one hand, find people to photograph, and on the other hand, have a usefulness for the work, besides just its value as art. I always liked producing work that was as intrinsically beautiful a statement about human beings as possible, but at the same time might have some advocacy value as we evolve and change as a society. So that exhibit was particularly powerful and useful in that way.
Yeah, Andrew is he's both an artist and an activist. He's a very gentle activist. He doesn't hit you over the head with things. What Andrew does is show you people in a way that makes it almost impossible not to somehow identify with them, or at least to want to know more about them. And there's something about his photographs that make you, that I think, at least for me, draw me to those people who are the most different from me, and the people that I hang out with. And I think that's the essence of what he's trying to do. He's trying to remind us, again, that this is a community, whether it's the community of Fayetteville or of Arkansas or of humanity, and that we need to look at each other the way that Andrew manages to look at them, to see these people, and to ask yourself, who are these people? Who are they to me? Why should I care about them?
We named that exhibit after the poem, "He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in." When I began that exhibit, I thought that it was about overcoming stigma so that we could draw a circle that would be large enough to include people with developmental disabilities. But what I discovered in the process of doing that exhibit was that it was just the opposite. That it was the people who I was given the gift of being able to meet and photograph in that community who drew a circle that was large enough to include me and large enough to include the people that I might bring in through this exhibit. So the real love and I had the wit to win, we drew a circle that took him in was coming from the people that I was photographing.
Utilizing the lessons learned with acting coach Stella Adler to observe with complete unconditional compassion, in 1982, Andrew Kilgore partnered with the Arkansas Repertory Company to create a portrait collection of actors as their stage characters, capturing not only their costuming, but also their subtext and inner motivation.
So when I got to go to the Arkansas Repertory Theater and meet the people there and get to be part of that community, and then the director asked me if I would be interested in photographing their productions, I kind of went for it. You know, that was the real fun thing to get to do. But because of the kind of portrait photographer that I am, after I had done a couple of productions, I realized that what would be fun for me would be to have the actors and actresses at the end of their rehearsal period, right before they started to actually produce the play, after they had their costumes and their makeup and their character developed, to come over to the studio in character and in costume, and as though that character had come to have his portrait made. And that would include people like Marley's ghost from Dickens' Christmas Carol, and all these bizarre characters. They bought it. I mean, they went for it. So through production after production, they came over to the studio all in character and costume, and we would do this strange series of portrait studies of these people in character. And then one of the things that happened is that some of the actors, because it was a repertory theater, would be in several different productions. So we would have the same actor and all these different characters, and that made such an interesting kind of project that we put together an exhibit of those photographs.
Gaining fame as a photographer, Andrew was recruited by the prestigious magazine Arkansas Business to become their signature cover photo portraitist.
The editor of the magazine said that they wanted to do a series where they would photograph a business leader from the Arkansas community, and they would put one picture on the cover, and then they would have a whole series of photographs in combination with an interview in the centerfold of the magazine. And they were printing it at that point on these large sheets, all black and white. It was really neat. So I agreed to do it, and he told me they wouldn't be able to pay me very much, which didn't come as a big surprise. So I told him, okay, I would do it for that relatively small amount of money if the deal would be that whenever these guys came over to be, or women came over to be photographed, that they had to spend at least an hour just sitting and talking to me beforehand. So basically it was this poor starving artist hippie guy getting to have some power over these super rich, powerful CEOs and stuff. So they would come and they would sit in my living room, and I would just talk to them, and just ask them questions. Sometimes some of them got really mad at me when I disagreed with them about stuff.
The first shoot I went to would have been probably about 1986. Andrew had been shooting for us a little bit before then, but I joined the company in November of '85. And what was really fun on my first shoot that I remember is just watching Andrew interact with the various business people he was shooting with. Because Andrew has kind of a laid-back, kind of get-to-know-you kind of guy, and some of these, especially the businessmen, they were pretty schedule-oriented, time-sensitive, and they kept waiting for Andrew's like, when's he going to start taking pictures? He's just chatting me up here, and we're having conversation and things, but I thought I was here to get my picture made, So they're kind of thinking this is going to be a 20-minute in and out kind of thing. But Andrew likes to get to know the people he's photographing. And so it was really kind of a neat just to be a fly on the wall to watch these guys chafing a lot of times. Waiting for Andrew to do his magic, and yet wondering, okay, why am I here again? I'm supposed to get my picture made, not talking with some artsy kind of laid-back guy over at his house in the Central High neighborhood. That's where Andrew had his studio back in the day when we worked with him. But the thing about it was, I think that was really gave him a little bit of patience to work with Andrew if it really tried it, was that it was a privilege. people considered it quite an honor to have their photo taken with Andrew Kilgore and make the cover of Arkansas Business. And Andrew helped establish a lot of our brand, if you will, back in the day, because no one else did those classic black and white portraits like we did. And so the business people, when they were asked to be a profile subject for Arkansas Business, that was part of the package, is an Andrew Kilgore photo. And so I think after a while, though, word started getting around about, you know, Andrew's technique and things, and so they were a little bit more laid back. But at first, it was new. They not, maybe some of those guys had never dealt with someone quite like Andrew. I was at that photo shoot, so I remember it back in '87, back in August of '87. So it's been quite a number of years ago. You know, back then George Gleason was just an up-and-coming, promising young banker, and now he leads one of the most prominent banking organizations, not only in Arkansas, but I guess in the Southeast. And Andrew was there to capture him back when he was still making his way coming up through the ranks, establishing himself as a top-notch banker.
The Kilgore photos have been hanging all over the office all these years, and those photos were kind of part of what helped Arkansas Business establish a reputation, because it was such a striking-looking publication, mainly because of those cover photos, that it helped, that Andrew Kilgore, I am persuaded, and I would argue, helped Arkansas Business establish itself as a credible, reliable, quality publication.
The sesquicentennial year came up, and somebody in Little Rock who was a big fan of my work, she thought that it would be a great opportunity for me to do like a portrait of Arkansas people. That's the title of it. So the idea was to, like the Fayetteville Townfolk Project was about all the different kinds of people that live in Fayetteville. The Arkansas People Project was about all the different kinds of people that lived in Arkansas. So during that sesquicentennial year, which was 1986, there were all these different organizations all over the state which organized sesquicentennial events. So I would go to those places and I would just set up my portable studio right in the middle of whatever was going on. And as people would go by, I had someone working with me then, and we'd flag them down and say, hey, we're doing this project for the sesquicentennial. You want to be in it? You know, so again, I had an opportunity to look at a really broad cross-section of people, because Arkansas, because of the way that Arkansas works, we have a big hill country area, predominantly white, and then we have a big delta area, which is like half and half African American and white. So we have an interesting cross-section of cultures and ethnicities in Arkansas. So that project gave me an opportunity to study all those different ways of being a person.
They all filled out a little questionnaire, and we photographed people of every possible description, and ethnicity and age and economic background, everything. And then we photographed Bill Clinton at the state fair.
I always went out to the fair, which was in the fall, so we were already getting ready for the sesquicentennial, which was in 1986, the next year. And I already had my little pin on, and I always had a governor's day at the state fair. So he came out and took pictures of me when I was out there just meeting with people. I just sit there, I'd go tour the exhibits and then sit at a booth like everybody else, and just anybody wanted to talk to me could. And he came up and took one of his, you know, true pictures. He always just tried to just shoot what he saw. Well, I knew him in the 80s, you know, because I'd see him around. He was quite prominent, and he, I liked him because, first of all, he didn't try to overpose his pictures. He just tried to show what people were like. And I love that book. I've got that book at home in New York. I look at it all the time still. You know, and he had all different kinds of people there, and you could see their common humanity. And that's what I always thought he was great at. he was able to convey what he saw without trying to, you know, touch up the pictures. He just took life as it was, and it was beautiful and powerful and profoundly honest.
Much like an audience in a darkened theater, photographs allow the viewer to sit back and become passive voyeurs in the lives of others. We have public permission for frank observation, so some of our guard comes down. We stand, we look with open curiosity. Thanks to Kilgore's ability to capture the riveting authenticity of his subject, we are pulled out of passivity, engaged emotionally, and the lines between ourselves and the other are blurred. We connect, we identify, we understand. And it is there where real change in how we interact with others can take place. A genuine connection.
The Annie Casey Foundation ran a national competition to set up these youth at risk projects in various American cities. And Little Rock applied for one of these $6 million grants. The fellow that was in charge of it called me up a couple days before their grant proposal was due. And this was back in the day when it wasn't digital, it was all, you know. And they wanted a cover. And they asked me if I would design a cover for their grant proposal in 24 hours. So I pulled up 2 of the photographs that I had done for this youth organization and designed a cover for them and had 30 copies of it printed and delivered it to them, and they put it on the cover of their proposal. And then they won this. Several months later, they were having a celebration at the governor's mansion, and several of the Annie Casey people were there to meet the Little Rock people, and I was invited to it, so I was there. And at one point I was talking to one of the Annie Casey people, and he said, "What was your part in this?" And I said, "Actually, all I did was just design the cover." And he said, "That's interesting." He said, "When we were sitting around the table trying to decide who to give these grants to, one of us held up the grant proposal from Little Rock and said, well, at least these people put their kids on the cover of the proposal." So I always felt like, you know, it worked. Again, somebody called me up and said, you know, this is who we are, and we want you to go out and photograph 64 seniors that are active in these senior centers all over the state. So I photographed 8 people in each of 8 different areas and interviewed them as well, taped interviews with them, and went to 8 different corners of the state to do it. I learned so much about aging. Then I was in my 50s, you know, and these people were just so powerful, and almost all of them very oriented towards service work, and just doing whatever they could to help the people around them, and it was very inspiring.
I suspect that we're seeing in Andrew's pictures what Andrew sees. And you really can't do that. You really can't completely be in someone else's shoes or see things from their vantage point. But somehow master photographers allow you a different vantage point. He is able to capture things in the finished product that is a reflection of the beauty that is actually there. I think a lot of times artists try to make people see the world more beautiful than it is, and there's nothing wrong with that kind of art. But there are philosopher artists like Andrew who try to show you the truth and the real beauty that's really there, that's hard to see sometimes.
I loved the people down at St. Francis House, and I would go down there from time to time and photograph, and you know, and they used the photographs in a variety of different ways to document what they were doing and promote it. Some of my favorite photographs come from those shoots down there. We did it the same way. We took the portable rig down there and set it up at St. Francis House and just photographed staff and volunteers and people who would come there to get clothes or counseling.
I think it's the eyes. It's always struck me that I think the Spanish have it right. You know, the Spanish word for eye, ojo, is also the word for spring. And what is a spring? After all, a spring is this place where something bubbles up out of the ground, out of the earth. You know, life comes up out of the earth, bursts into the light, into our world. In a way, that's what human eyes do. You know, you see the life inside that person coming out to you, into your world. And Andrew's gift, in part, I think, is somehow able to sit with people and to connect with them in a way that in which they somehow want to reach out. You know, they allow that light to come out, that life to come out of themselves, for us to see. He does that.
So there's a kind of clarity and honesty and lack of pretense there, which is it's the environment that I feel safest and most comfortable in, oddly enough. And it's an environment in which a lot of mainstream people would feel the least safe. I had moved back to Fayetteville then, and I had a friend who was a psychiatrist who had always wanted me to do a companion piece to the We Drew a Circle exhibit which was about people with developmental disabilities, only focusing on people with serious mental illness. But I just decided that it was time to do that. I wanted to do another major advocacy piece, another big, major piece of work that would take years and take me to a lot of different places and really confront our major social concerns. It's very much about stigma. One of the things that was most interesting to me about these two companion pieces, the We Drew a Circle piece on the one hand and the Healing Changes piece on the other hand. One of them I started in '81 and finished in '83 or '84. The other one I started in '91 and finished in '93 or '94. The We Drew a Circle piece went to 37 different states and 17 different state capitol buildings and was featured on national public service ads, and I mean, it was incredibly widely used. The piece about people with serious mental illness had 2 outings, was not picked up by any major advocacy groups, and just kind of sputtered and died. A few years ago, it was discovered, crated up, and stuck away in a building that was due to be demolished, and it got saved, and it hung for a while. I don't know whether it's still there, but it hung for a while in the psychiatry department of the medical school. I kind of was slapped in the face with what my stepson's life is like now. My stepson is a paranoid schizophrenic. The fact of the matter is that he's had a really rough time in life. And he's been in and out of jail and been in and out of trouble, and he's never been able to find a way to live in this society where he could thrive in any way. He's been one of those people who just, I don't think he's had a job since he was 20, and he's now 41. He's been in jail, he's been in prison, he's self-medicated with drugs and alcohol. He's just had a pretty rough time. He's never quite made it. He's always skittering along the edge. You know, he's one of those millions of people who lives in perennial systemic poverty in America that, you know, that we can't quite figure out what to do with. Been diagnosed with various forms of mental illness. And I love Jack. Jack can be pretty scary. Sometimes it's really hard for me to deal with him. But I'm conscious of him all the time. So I realized that there was a significant percentage of our population who will never have a job, who are not going to get fixed and fed back into the mainstream culture. They're not going to get saved. They're out there. And the reason they're out there is because they suffer from various forms of mental illness. And all those different forms of mental illness have as a symptom some form of paranoia. And what paranoia means is that you're afraid of other people. And you're enough afraid of other people so that when somebody tries to fix you or save you, it's like, let me the hell out of here. It's like we think, well, we need more homeless shelters. But what we do with the homeless shelters, we take a bunch of homeless people and we crowd them into the same room in bunk beds. Well, that's the last thing they want. What they're looking for is privacy. What they're looking for is to get away from the intrusive, constantly in their face kind of culture that reacts immediately with their paranoia. Their paranoia is saying, let me go. I'd rather sleep under a bridge. You know, I'd rather carry my possessions around in a duffel bag than have somebody in my face about it all the time, because I just cannot tolerate that. I knew that I was fascinated by this population of people, and I knew I wanted to photograph them. And I knew that community meals was an obvious place to do that work. And what I do is I beg $20 bills off my friends that probably have several of them in their pocket at any given time, and they're not going to miss one or two.
I mean, every time he goes and does these projects, he's like, hey, you got 20 bucks for my project? You got 20 bucks for my, and he's begging from everybody I know.
And then I go to the community meals and I set up at the far end of the hall where it's relatively, unnoticeable, and I'm behind a small backdrop that blocks off what I'm doing with the north light window. And then I just go out and I say, I go up to people and I say, I'm taking pictures of people. I'll pay you a $20 bill to participate. And a lot of the people say, nah, but then enough of the people go, gosh, $20. Because for these folks, $20 really changes their experience for a day or two. And the guys that give me the $20 bills don't even notice it's gone. That's the irony.
The fastest growing group of people in America are people over 80. And most of them will have some period of their lives when they'll need some assistance. And then there are people with developmental disabilities or all kinds of other problems. We have all these people who are coming home bearing the wounds of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq I think we should embrace it as not only an obligation but an opportunity. It's an area where we can create, by being a giving society and a decent society, we can create a lot of employment opportunities for people who really like serving other people and like helping them live their lives better.
I mean, I'm a photographer. What have I got? I accept the fact that these people cannot be fixed and cannot be saved, but I do not accept the fact that they can't be helped. They can't be provided with a safe place to sleep, safe food to eat, adequate medical care, access to information and communication, and some form of accessible transportation. It seems like every human being ought to be afforded these 5 things, not because they have, as an individual, have a right to them, but because as a community, if we have a large section of our population which do not have those 5 securities, I call them, then it's like a person with an infected little toe. It's like, you think, well, it's just my little toe, I don't have to worry about that. Well, you can die from an infected little toe. And because our society has a wounded part, a deeply wounded part that we're not interfacing with, to use a nice tech term, that we're not making a connection with. And the reason we're not making a connection with them is because we fall prey to this whole strong independent, I'm a strong independent person, So these other people who are clearly not strong independent people, because they're out there on the street, my God, they smell bad, they must be innately different from me, right? So that accepting the fact that these people are different from me just leaves us lost. What we have to experience, not know, but experience, is the fact that these people are not different from me, that they are the same as me, that they're me, except with an illness that causes them to be unable to make a connection with mainstream institutions. And it's as simple as that. They have an illness which causes them to be unable to connect with mainstream institutions.
If too many people are poor and too many kids don't get a good start in life, it is a constraint on the aggregate potential of the economy that affects everybody else. And we need to say that over and over and over again, that basically we're all better off when more people can get the education they need, more people can get a decent job, more people can support their families. It creates opportunities that wash over the whole society. And when we forget that, we pay a terrible price. Most people are really good people, and they just want to work hard and have a decent life. And the purpose of politics and economics ought to be to enable them to live how they want to live, give them the power to do that. And I think that these pictures of his can remind people of that. It's so easy in times of scarcity, or where people are having culture wars over whatever they're fighting over at a given time, to think that our differences are more important than our common humanity, and they're just not. And that's the ultimate lesson of any collection of Kilgore photos you see.
There's something about that reality, that truth of what is, and it really comes through in Andrew's special projects. And you just immediately felt like, these are real people. That could be me. That could be me. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it makes you realize if you have your mental health and you have your physical health and you have social well-being and all that stuff, that's probably grace.
My craving is to make fine art photographs that will last through the ages and be a document of my time. And I think I've done that, but I've often supported myself and my family doing that by selling the pictures to the people's moms and dads and grandparents. So what I wanted to do as I designed a portrait venue was to find a way to make fine art documentary photographs, and at the same time to make a photograph that would be appealing and successful as a family document. That became that process of training my subject while I'm photographing them to be a good subject became what I do, really. To establish that relationship with my subject, and then to work with them until the outcome becomes something which is truthful and also beautiful, you know, so that I have to both be alert to the composition, and to the lighting and to the exposure and getting all the tech stuff right, and at the same time I have to be in rapport with the subject and get all the emotional, personal stuff right as well.
It's amazing. I've seen him with people of all ages, and the rapport is instant. And it's a situation, much like when I'm interviewing someone, but it's a situation where not everyone's at ease sitting down on a stool and having their portrait taken. You know, you think about how you look, you think, it's uncanny how with Andrew, the people I've seen him work with, they're not thinking about that seemingly seconds after they sit down. And there's no like magic, mysterious thing he says or does. It's his presence. Suddenly, people are just feeling relaxed.
Well, he tells stories a lot when he's taking pictures to get a reaction out of people. I've been photographed by Andrew quite a bit, and I've been photographed by a few other people, and the other people sort of just snap randomly. And Andrew, I mean, he'll tell a story or have a conversation with you, and it'll sort of force a reaction. And it might not be the reaction he thinks, it'll just be a reaction. And those natural reactions are where you find the humanity in his photos.
Oh, people love his work. People can identify with the quality and the beauty, and that there's something special that's down deep inside of people that he's able to draw out. He makes them very comfortable in front of the camera. And so I think that's really unique, because usually people having their picture made end up stiff and uncomfortable, and you totally forget that you're having your picture made. We have joked before about that when it comes some point way far in the future, that people are going to look at that collection and go, who are these people, and why are there so many wonderful pictures of this family? You know, because you think back in history of art, and if you had your portrait done, then you were somebody of importance, and we just feel very special to have so many wonderful portraits that Andrew did.
I was asking another mutual friend right after we were having coffee, how would you describe Andrew? Because I was thinking, eccentric, eclectic, I don't know, how do you describe it, somebody like Andrew? And the gentleman I was talking to, who's also in his inner circle, said compassionate. Well, Andrew overheard that. He was coming around the corner, and he said, I hope you're not talking about me, because I am not compassionate. And I understand both of their perspectives. But the truth is, Andrew does compassion. He may not think of himself as compassionate, but his actions are compassionate. He is a human verbiage. He is doing justice. He is doing love. He is doing kindness. He is doing fairness. And he doesn't always feel like that. That's one of the wonderful things about getting to be his friend, is that he does those things in spite of how he feels a lot of times. And that's very inspiring.
His work is authentic, not just in his art. His art is authentic. But what he captures the authenticity of other people, whether it's in a dance or a grief, a sadness, a poignancy. He captures something so authentic that it draws out an authentic response. And maybe that's what would be healing from age to age to age as his work goes on and on and on. There aren't that many opportunities in this world. There are far too few opportunities to engage authentically with another human being. There are so many things that get in the way, but he strips all of those things.
Because it shines a spotlight on how we're all connected, on how some homeless man on the street is connected to a senator, or how I'm connected to an 80-year-old woman. And it might not be so easy to say in words, describe, but when you see his pictures, you get that sense of being connected.
Because when you look at somebody's face, looking into his camera, you think you can look into their mind and their heart. You can't look at those pictures carefully and not feel that. If you look at them, the sheer honesty of them grabs you. You think, I know this person, I know that person, I know that person. You can feel it. And that's a great gift. Not everyone has that gift.
In 1976, I decided that what I wanted to do with the rest of my life was to create a collection of photographs of all the different kinds of people who were alive in the United States during the time that I lived here, and to preserve that collection so that it could be available to people as individuals and to the community forever.